Ahasverus becomes a key figure in a secret war over the fate of humanity. His immortality isn't a gift, it's a chain, and only the second coming can break it. On his way home, a young man stopped by the supermarket to pick up some groceries. He had forgotten the shopping list at home, so he called his wife to make sure he got everything she needed, especially the canned goods she'd asked for. While he was focused on the call, a scruffy homeless man suddenly caught his attention. He had quickly grabbed the first can he saw and rushed off. At the checkout, the young man saw the same homeless man again, this time standing in line ahead of him. The man didn't have enough money to pay for a yogurt and a few other items. He pleaded with the cashier to let it slide, insisting that, in a way, she held his fate in her hands. But the cashier, cold and unbending, refused to hand over the food without payment, like a heartless machine. Realizing he was short on money, the homeless man turned to the people in line, asking for help. All he needed was 10 rubles, a small amount, pocket change really, but everyone around him ignored him as if he didn't exist. He muttered that God gives us these trials to test whether we can stand together and help one another, but not everyone wants to hear that. One man quickly gathered his groceries and switched to another line, doing everything he could to avoid dealing with the situation. Turning to the young man, the homeless man reminded him that everyone will one day face a final judgment, and asked him for just a bit of spare change. It was clear from the man's clean-cut appearance and confident posture that he was doing well in life, but he ignored the plea, unwilling to part with even a coin. Just as the scene was starting to grow uncomfortable, an elderly woman stepped forward and handed the homeless man the money he needed to pay. The man told her that this small act of kindness might one day tip the scale in her favor, perhaps even save her from damnation and lead her to the angels who protect souls from eternal suffering. Moments later, the homeless man found a crumpled bill in his pocket. He immediately paid the woman back, refusing to keep what wasn't his. Then, showing unexpected generosity, he turned to the young man, handed him 10 rubles, and said that unlike some people, he wasn't stingy, and he believed in helping those who might be bound for hell. The young man was taken aback. The words stuck with him. Despite his financial success, when he got to the register, he realized he, too, was short, by exactly 10 rubles. With a mix of guilt and humility, he accepted the coin from the homeless man to pay for his groceries. On the way to his car, the young man finds himself forced to talk again with his wife, who monitors his every move. Some time ago, he had been unfaithful, and while she managed to forgive him, the trust was gone. Now she constantly suspects him, asking who he's talking to and where he is. Exhausted by her controlling behavior, he promises to call her back later and starts loading groceries into the trunk. Spotting the same homeless man again, he decides to find a way to return the money, not wanting to feel guilty in front of him. During their conversation, the young man admits he doesn't believe in Jesus Christ. As an educated man and mathematician, he trusts only facts and verified evidence. To him, Jesus and figures like him are fictional characters people invent to justify their actions or explain life's hardships. These words hit the homeless man hard. He fundamentally disagrees with the young man's view. The homeless man suggests that the young man's ultimate goal is to die and become worm food. The young man doesn't see that as the climax or purpose of life, but he recognizes it as an inevitable end for all of us, something that must be accepted. The homeless man staunchly rejects this, arguing that if someone lives just to become worm food, they are already worm food in essence, they just haven't matured yet. The young man, who relies on science and facts, is hurt by the homeless man's mocking and scornful attitude. Understanding the man's extreme skepticism toward his words, he challenges him. At least give one argument proving that faith and God are real, not fictional. The homeless man claims he has undeniable proof of Jesus Christ's existence, a fact no one could refute. The young man is willing to listen, but the homeless man refuses to speak, saying he's told this story hundreds of times. This frustrates the young man. He's hearing it for the first time, but the homeless man is referring not to this specific conversation, but to his interactions with people in general. He insists that he is Ahasverus, a man doomed to wander the earth from century to century until the second coming of Christ. The young man reacts with extreme skepticism and even jokes at the homeless man's expense. Realizing the conversation is pointless, the homeless man decides to walk away, tired of empty chatter. Trying to get a final jab in, the young man tells him to keep lazing around and enjoy a break from him on the way back. Unexpectedly, the homeless man reacts aggressively, almost lunging at him, then breaks down in tears, overwhelmed by despair and frustration. The conversation is interrupted by a phone call from the young man's wife, but he ignores it, realizing that the homeless man is a fascinating character and he wants to understand his story, to decide whether to believe it or not. Trying to support the homeless man, the young guy suggests not dwelling on the past, but rather forgetting it and moving forward. He advises letting go of past mistakes and starting to plan each day to grow and achieve something. The homeless man responds skeptically, quoting an old saying, "If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans for tomorrow." He explains it as the unpredictability of human life, but the guy gets annoyed by the conversation about God and Jesus. He's genuinely convinced that it's all fiction but asks for undeniable proof of any higher powers. The homeless man repeats that he's a person who has lived on earth for over 2,000 years. He's not just certain of Jesus' existence, he claims to have seen him in person. More than that, he says he was the one who wouldn't let Jesus rest while carrying his cross. When the guards were leading Jesus, he tried to lean on the house where this man had lived 2,000 years ago, but the man forbade him. He even told Jesus that he could only rest on the way back, which is why those words left such an impression. Jesus agreed but asked him to wait, turning this man into an immortal, waiting for the second coming of Christ. Thinking this was nonsense, the guy decides to leave and drives a few meters away, but then stops. He asks the man to guess how many fingers he's holding behind his back, but the homeless man can't. He only says that he speaks from what he's seen with his own eyes. He's no clairvoyant. Realizing he's genuinely intrigued by the story, the guy decides not only to argue but to keep talking, hoping to find contradictions in the man's tale. The homeless man has no way to prove his story. He has no possessions or clothes that have lasted more than 2,000 years. In fact, he doesn't even remember Jesus' face because their meeting happened so long ago. To the guy, this seems unimaginable. Jesus is such a significant figure, but it wasn't always that way. At the time, people didn't understand Jesus' meaning or power, so many turned away. He claimed to be the Son of God, but people were forbidden to believe, and followers could face brutal punishment or even death. Still finding the story too far-fetched, the guy offers money if the homeless man admits the whole thing is made up. He says he's willing to take the money and play along, even though it would be a lie, but his own story is real, and believing it is a personal choice. As the conversation continues, the guy tries to understand whether the man ever tried to change his situation. The homeless man admits he couldn't influence the past, but he had served as a clergyman for over 100 years. He hoped God would speak to him, but it never happened, or perhaps he never heard. Trying to shift the conversation away from Jesus, the young man attempts to understand what the homeless man's life has actually been like. From his perspective, immortality is a gift that lets you try everything ordinary people are too afraid to attempt. The homeless man, however, sees all those so-called limitations as mere conventions. To him, a single human life is already enough to experience everything, do something crazy, or travel the world. In his view, the only real limitation is fear, the fear of something new or unknown, the fear of making a mistake, or of paying too high a price for it. Moreover, though he is immortal, he can still lose a finger or a leg, and he would continue to live. Hearing this, the young man wonders aloud, what would happen if a tank fired at him? Could he live without a head or other parts of his body? The homeless man just smiles and assures him that nothing like that will ever happen. His life is full of strange stories where he could have died, yet a string of coincidences made it impossible. He even admits to having tried to end his life at one point, only to end up hanging in a tree for 2 weeks until the branch broke, leaving him with a broken leg. In 1945, he was captured by the Nazis, and fearing torture, tried to take his own life. A bullet got stuck in the pistol barrel, which then exploded, leaving him with scars and burns, but he survived. Wandering through countries in the Eastern Europe, he eventually moved to Russia about 40 years ago. It's hard to believe visually, as the man looks no older than 30, but his claims are difficult to refute with logic or facts. The young man continues to think it's fantastical. After all, stories like these usually come from beggars or con artists. The homeless man doesn't argue. He asks for nothing and tries to deceive no one. He's simply telling his story, and whether anyone believes it is entirely up to them. The young man suggests that perhaps the man suffers from schizophrenia, but the homeless man rejects this, knowing full well what's normal and what isn't, and he'd never discuss such things with a psychiatrist. Recalling his only proof, the homeless man shows scars on his arm, left in the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. He would mark them every 100 years, but the problem is, there's no way to confirm if it's true, or if the scars are just a week old. Ultimately, it all comes down to faith. The listener can either accept his words as truth or dismiss them as fiction. Knowing the guy was still skeptical, the man suggested a bold experiment. He handed him a knife and asked him to stab him in the stomach. If he died, he'd been lying. If he survived, it was the truth. The guy couldn't bring himself to do it. He realized he could end up in jail if the crazy homeless man decided to play a trick on him. Deciding to test the man's claims another way, the guy asked him to tell stories about history and events in the world. The man couldn't answer most questions, since he hadn't paid attention to world affairs while he was focused on living in the moment. He didn't follow the news, and without the internet or television, it would have been nearly impossible. He hadn't met global leaders, and even if he had, he didn't remember, it had been too long. He hadn't cared much about specific people or who they became later, since time moves fast and most memories fade quickly. To illustrate, he asked the guy to recall what he had done just a few years ago, showing how fragile human memory really is. Even something as basic as the fact that the earth is round, he only learned from books 1,500 years after walking it. Back in the time of Jesus, the same went for ancient languages. He had spoken them once, but with time and lack of practice, they had faded into the background. Trying to find a flaw in the homeless man's story, The guy asked if he had ever seen aliens. The man admitted he hadn't met any, though he had read extensively about space. Considering there are millions of planets in the universe, it would be naive to assume humanity is the only intelligent life. At the same time, you could think in reverse. Maybe the world existed first, and we appeared later as a result. The question of whether anything exists beyond our planet is too abstract. It's a bit like a child cutting shapes out of colored cardboard. You can either cut out a figure and use the scraps around it, or remove pieces until only the figure remains. In both cases, there's the shape and the space around it, but which came first, or what the creator intended, remains unknown. Still curious about the story, the young man practically shadows the homeless man, trying to understand why Jesus cursed him. The man doesn't see it as a punishment. Rather, he believes he spoke his own fate aloud, and Jesus simply blessed those words, bringing them to life. He feels his real curse isn't immortality itself, but that he's changed nothing in his life. He hasn't become a creative person or achieved anything significant. He just keeps waiting. The homeless man doesn't dismiss other perspectives on God, suggesting that his presence can't be awaited because he's already within each of us. He sees through our eyes, and our judgments and thoughts are, in a way, God's will. At the same time, humans carry not just God but also the devil, the very evil that pushes people to make terrible choices. The young man takes this far too literally, imagining it like cartoons with an angel and demon perched on each shoulder. But it's really more of a metaphor to simplify the idea. In the end, the homeless man insists that people always have a choice. Fate isn't predetermined, rather, fate is shaped by your choices. Trying to process all this, the young man wonders why religious people can be so fanatical. The homeless man explains it with a simple example: personal offense. If a stranger insults you, you might shrug it off, but insult your mother, and you react fiercely, because she's closest to you. Religion works the same way. People just need to respect each other's faith, and there would be fewer wars, but human nature tends to invite conflict, causing problems and countless deaths. A call from his wife pulls him back to reality. She tells him she's heading to the store. He's been gone for over an hour, and his suspicious wife is anxious to see whether he's spending time with another woman. During the conversation, he mentions that his wife is religious, unlike him. At the same time, he can't answer a simple question: does he consider himself happy? He doubts it, though a truly happy person shouldn't feel that way. The homeless man admits that time has become so fleeting that he's lost the habit of changing anything. He wishes he could live better, but waiting for the arrival of something greater, he gets lost in endless problems, leaving his life gray. There are few events or exciting adventures, but that's part of the punishment for a mistake he made 2,000 years ago. In the end, everyone's life passes too quickly, and no matter what you do, your best years slip away. People grow old, but they don't truly grow up, because they spend their whole lives barely realizing how fast time moves and that the best moments are already behind them. The young man comes to an obvious conclusion: yesterday's version of you is a different person. And in a way, it is. Looking at old photos, you can't believe you once wore that outfit or hairstyle, but it happened, with a version of yourself you no longer recognize. The homeless man admits he's a Jew who was sheltered from Hitler by a Polish family. Despite the horrific events of the past, he refuses to believe that things were worse back then, because every era has its share of tragedies and horrors. People perceive reality differently, and what seems acceptable now might someday be seen as just another dark chapter in human history. He compares humanity's fate to a river. It flows in the same channel for centuries, while everything around it changes, even the water itself, but the current remains constant. The hardest questions to grasp are those of the paradox of faith and our purpose. If the paradox of faith is a barrier created, and solved, only in your own mind, the purpose of a human being, and of humanity as a whole, remains a mystery even to Ahasverus. The homeless man admits that eternal life isn't a gift, and unlimited possibilities only seem like one. When you're in no rush, you don't strive to do anything special or meaningful, because there's infinite time ahead, which turns you into a lazy person. In a way, life is structured correctly. It forces you to keep moving, to try to accomplish as much as possible, so that your life isn't wasted or empty. The young man tries to understand how an immortal person could fulfill themselves, but it's too heavy a question. According to the homeless man, he's never seen anyone truly achieve self-realization. Nobody has ever gotten everything they wanted. No one received proper recognition in life, and after death, many become only objects of discussion. Even Hitler, who tried to be great, ended up a defeated laughingstock, remembered by many school kids only for his ridiculous little mustache. The guy keeps asking himself the big question: how can a person get to heaven if the devil already lives inside them? According to the homeless man, humans are driven by only two things: fear and love. Those who live by fear are doomed to suffer, even while alive. Those who love and are loved walk with God and can find their way to heaven. At one point, the guy makes a wild guess and asks the homeless man if he is God. The man laughs and explains that the human form is just a symbol, one that will live on as long as humanity exists. After getting a message from his wife, the guy rushes to the parking lot to tell her about this crazy encounter. He recounts everything that's happened over the past couple of hours, but she looks at him like he's lost his mind. Soon, the homeless man's boss shows up. He works as a loader, and demands that the man head to his job. But the guy notices something important: they look exactly alike. Thinking her husband has gone mad, the wife drives off, yet he still sees the homeless man's face in her. Deciding to leave, he gets in his car, but when he looks in the rearview mirror, he sees the homeless man again, like God, present in each of us. Or maybe he is God. Can someone who has lived for thousands of years, witnessing the rise and fall of empires and the faith of countless generations, truly keep their belief in God alive? Or does eternal life inevitably turn faith into mere knowledge, drained of its spiritual essence? Share your thoughts in the comments down below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more. See you in the next video.